Today we are exploring a subject that's both fascinating and foundational: art style guides in games. What's the magic behind the visual uniformity in great looking games? How do several artists work together on one project and create a visual experience that looks so cohesive? That magic lies in art style guides. From the shape language to the color scheme, art style guides serve as guidance influencing everything, from character design to environmental aesthetics. But how realistic are these guides? How achievable are they, especially in a fast-paced game development environment? And what utility do they bring to a game's overall success? Joining us today is Jack Gilson, an expert in the field, to help us explore these questions and peel back the layers of this often believed to be essential aspect of the art pipeline. Together we will assess the realism, achievability, and utility of art style guides. So let's dive into the episode. I'm very excited to have Jack here on this podcast. I would like to start with a little introduction. I know Jack personally because we work together at Rovio, and we have also been together on one of the podcasts with Deconstructor Fun. Jack is basically a self-trained and self-taught art director. He has been working in the industry for about nearly 20 years. And the first game that Jack made, he sold that game to Epic. And Jack has also worked on Futurama and Lego games and Temple Run, and lots of games from Angry Birds and Star Wars games, and many new IPs. Jack is currently working as senior art director at Scopely.
Yeah.
And and Jack is the favorite style of work is very stylized and colorful visual look. So that's something that I'm also personally always interested in. And I find that style most fascinating and works for the market and stuff like this. So I think we have a lot of things that we share together. How's it going, Jack?
Yeah, really good, man. Really good to be here. Happy that you invite me onto this call to talk. I'm going to try not to swear today. I'm going to be as good as I can. No promises, but I'm going to try.
Amazing. Our topic today is to talk about art style guides in games. And there's a very funny, and I don't know if you remember this, but I think the first introduction and the connection between you and me when we were at Rovio connected through style guide, because this is I remember when I probably sent you a message over and you were in Stockholm, we started to talk on the Slack channel or something. And then you sent over a style guide to me from one of the projects that you were working on an Angry Birds project. And then I saw over it and I was like, man, this guy has really put together a lot of effort in putting together a beautiful looking style guide. And back in that days, I was starting on my project in the Helsinki studio, and I was authoring a style guide myself, on one of my projects. Mm-hmm. And I remember I sent it over to you, and this is how we kind of exchanged our business cards as a style guide thingy. And this is why this is so such a great coincidence, and the topic that we're talking about. So,
I completely forgot about that. I think the first time I met you, I thought was probably over. Do we even use Slack back at Rovio? I thought I was using Zoom mostly then, but
I think so. Yeah,
Skype. I was Skyping most of the time then. But I think I remember the first time I met you properly was actually at the Finnish office with Tatu. We went out for lunch somewhere. I can't remember, it was some place by the lake or something. And I think we were starting to talk about style guides then as well. But well, thank you. I didn't realize my style guide was that impressionable on you. That's really good. I guess, was that for Legends, the Legends game that I was working on with the team?
Yeah, that was it. And I think basically the whole style guide focused a lot about the do's and don'ts, and there's something personally excites me the most. Yeah. And it was very, very in-depth, almost like a Bible, and probably a best onboarding document someone can have in your team as an artist who's joining the company. And you give it over to them, and they will already be very heads up and get a great head start on the project by having something like that.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the main reasons of a style guide is for the consistency of building a product or a game. I think normally when I go into making style guides, they're much more sort of emotionally driven. So it's really the heart comes before the brain. And when I'm thinking about how the style guide should be created, it's really to portray the kind of emotion that you find in the game. I mean, I think I could probably break it down into two things actually. There's probably a vision guide, which is probably the precursor to the style guide, and that really is it's something that I would personally work with maybe a concept artist. It's really the beginning, and it's what are we aiming for? what kind of products are we looking at as our reference guides? You know, what sort of product is it going to be? The sort of genre, you know, a kind of a semi mood board, a few, you know, paint overs of characters that exist already, just to try and get a, you know, feel for it. Because that really sort of helps, you know, create a foundation to then start creating some art. So I think there's like, the style guide, it comes as for me anyway, it comes as the product forms. You can't really just do it from the beginning. Yeah, you can't just make a style guide and be like, this is what we're copying. It really has to be, it's created as you move along the process in the concept phase. So I think the one that you probably would have received was probably, you know, a good 8 months into Legends. And it was a pre-pivot from another version of the game that we had already been working on. But, you know, with a pre-pivot, obviously with a pivot, you know, there's always going to be some stuff you still want to keep and bring over. And so when you're working out on your style guide too, it's also good to have, you know, a few references. Obviously, we had Angry Birds as the IP to work with, which automatically helps build anything out, right? You've got the characters, the colors, everything that you need to, you know, create a character is basically done for you. So yeah, flushing out a style guide for, you know, an IP that exists already is actually pretty good. It's pretty simple. The hardest part really is creating the story based around that kind of universe that sort of matches the style guide at the same time. I mean, what kind of, like, when you worked on style guides, what's the kind of things that you think about first when you're sort of developing that?
I want to start with something which you just mentioned and which is very interesting. Like, many people believe that the style guide can be or should be created in the beginning or when you're starting the production. But this is so true that it cannot be created, and it is like a live document which can actually be done after some amount of work which has been done on the game. And I completely agree with it, because a lot of do's and don'ts and even the benchmarks or the reference or whatever the artist has to follow are not ready yet when you're beginning in the project and you don't really know. What I like to do is, and I don't know if this is like really an industry term or something that people follow so commonly, I have subdivided this into 2 different document name in my processes. The first document which you're referring, which is just created at the very early beginning, I call it like a vision document, like an art vision document or something. And the other one is the style guide. And the art vision document is something which we are referring to, like where there's some amount of concepts and some ideas and stuff like this. But then in that, I include a lot of material which is basically not created purposely for the project, but it can really narrow down your artistic vision, especially the vision of an art director who's trying to take the project into a certain direction. All of those things. So for example, how realistic you're going to go. So maybe you can even make like a graph and put together some examples from other games, like something very cartoony to something very realistic, something very simplified to very texture, very solid shaded to a lot of details and textures and stuff. And you just basically put your marker here, like this is where we want to be. Semi-realistic or very cartoony, stuff like this. And then you put together a lot of mood board from the other games, things like these. And also like lots of keywords. Like I think when you don't have a lot of art, you just put together a lot of like keywords on the attribute that you are trying to think of for the game and just put in there. So
maybe keywords, and as I mentioned, right, capturing, using art that exists already and painting over it. Also, it's kind of cheating, but it does help. It's kind of like what AI does now, right? You know, you're taking images that exist already and then changing them basically just for a very small amount of people to sort of help flush out an art style. It's basically, you know, references plus, you know, and I think that's super helpful, especially when you know the kind of the direction of the game you want to take it. It's very clear, you know, once you have a very good sort of, you know, general manager or product lead, and they know exactly what they're after. It's very easy to build a vision deck that they can understand and get behind. And then, you know, from there you can then start making some nice juicy concept art to put in the style guide.
Yeah. What do you think about the kind of influence these kind of documents make? And is that only limited to the art team and the people who are going to work on production to use it? Or can an art art style guide basically be also helpful for, let's say, designers or developers or marketing, or I
I
don't
think it
know?
could be. I think it's useful for everybody. If it tells a story of like how your product's going to be created, visually, it can help the devs. It can help the tech team, like tech art. It can help audio. It can help the writer to sort of if you're lucky enough to have like a writer on your team as well. If you're in a story, that can help them to sort of see the kind of world they've got to create around what you've made. I think it's very useful to get everybody on the same page when you're building a game, and art is the best way to do that. It's the easiest way to explain how something's going to look is obviously through a piece of artwork, right?
Mm,
So I think having an artist, an art lead, or concept artists making some nice artwork for the team to see as a whole of where we're taking the product, I think that really can help motivate the team as well.
mm. Uh, what makes me very curious is like, and now I'm switching this to the application in the industry, because gaming is like it goes to different platforms, and there
Mhm.
are dedicated AAA console games, and then PC games and mobile games and stuff. Have you observed the industry, or are you aware of how much is the adaptation of style guides into different markets and different genres? Like, for example, would, for example, AAA games might definitely be doing style guides, but not so much in the mobile games. And sometimes it's like a 50-50 ratio, or even lower in the case of small indie projects where people wouldn't be making style guides.
Yeah, I'd say style guide probably feels like it's better for a larger team when you've got more people to bring on board to the product and what it's going to look like. But yeah, I think the small team would probably still create, concept art, which essentially is, a concept piece. A piece of concept art is essentially what makes up a style guide. You from that piece of concept art, you can break everything down, like the characters, the palettes, the sort of ambience, the setting, and just break it down into further, more digestible chunks. But if you're going to make a game from scratch, I'm sure you'd still want to have a nice piece of art to represent what you're going to build, even just for your own sanity, right? So that if you're the lead artist on a small indie team, you can look back on it and realize the direction that you wanted to stay on. So it keeps you to the same path. It's also very good for, I think how massive social is now, like social media. It's also good for having pieces of artwork to actually share on social media as well. And I think dev diaries are a massive thing as well for smaller indie games now, and sort of showing how a production of a game is made is, I think that's exceptionally important too. And if you've got a guide written out, that's essentially your dev diary for the art team, ready to go out of the box. It's like this is what we're doing. Follow us on our path. So I think I think it comes down to the art director at the end, or the lead artist, or whoever it is in charge. But I think if I was on from working on a small team in the past, we had to come up with 3 different environment types for this game that was taking place over 3 different sort of stratospheres in the universe. And it was like ground level, which is like smoggy and dark, and because there's all clouds above it, it's all thundery and dark. Then there's the mid ground, which is where the sun's hitting it, and it's kind of a bit more Grand Canyony. And then there was like the sky zone, which is even above that, another selection of clouds. And there were 3 very specific different zones. So even then, it was worth spending the time, like a couple of weeks, working on some 3D models and painting over it to get the sort of look and feel of that. Even just put it on a board in the office. And the office was small, right? It was just this one room office that could hold about 10 of us. And it was just like, you just had those 3 pieces of artwork, which really, I think, helped, drive the vision of the game further. So yeah, I think, personally, there probably is mini style guides out there, even if it's just a concept art. But I think for big teams, then I believe the concept style guide is very important, because it's a big team. You need to have work in a consistent way, right? A very consistent way.
You mentioned a bit about like how the adaptation, and how does it gets used by the artist, like what's their way on how they're adhering to these kind of material.
Yeah.
Is there any tool or the best method for art directors, basically those who are preparing it, in order to ensure that the team is really, really following it? And because there are lots of cases where maybe you might have made a document and put together all the effort, and basically there's answer for everything, but not necessarily when the team and the people who are actually working on the assets are on a religious basis, or let's even say like um, a bit of like a checkpoint basis, are checking and referencing it. So how can the art leads basically make sure that, like, hey, I already have the answers of these things over there. Why are you not basically going to that? So what do you do about it?
Wow. Well, I mean, that's really good. The style guide is really good for, as I mentioned, like referencing. You can look back on that and be like, yeah, this is the kind of palette we want to use. Can we see these palettes working together? Obviously, it's not the full, I guess, calculation of how the product's art should be made, but it does have the basic sort of sums in there of how you go from like 1 to 2 to 3. So I mean, for working with, you know, say more junior members that are joining the team, and you still want to keep the vision going in a consistent way, you just want to make sure that they have a full understanding of the style guide. Everybody who is around them also understands the style guide fully, and that they have weekly or daily check-ins as well to even talk about their artwork, show where they're at, and then the art director or the lead artist can also, during that sort of stand up, just check, see how the work is going along. And obviously, the lead artist should have should know the art style from the back of their hand. They should know exactly what they should eat and breathe it. Essentially, know exactly what we're looking for. So I would say that it's just a case of keeping the team members, the more junior or the new team members, just in the loop of a good solid pathway of how you're going from A to B, just checking on their artwork. And from there, just that's the only way you can do it, is by making sure they're on the same path as you are with the art style guide.
Mm. One of the things which is what I feel, I don't know what you feel about it, but I think the art style guide, even if it's been made by the art lead or the art directors,
yeah,
it's an important document for the art directors. Even if they wrote it down, they knew everything about it. More than the team, I think it's a important tool for the art directors themselves, because for example, like if I put together all of my thoughts in there at one place, it really helps me on reviewing the work, giving feedback, basically whenever there's like, or even comparing sometimes, like if we are detouring a bit, or maybe like we are basically like going a bit off track with the quality or the style or whatever, then I go back to the document that I wrote and I basically look back at the material. So like you said, I mean, it's a collection of the best practices on what you need to do on the project, but it doesn't always answers all the things. I think this is also needed, isn't it? Like in order to have a bit of balance between set of rules versus the creative freedom that you want to offer to your team.
Yeah. I think also, when you have built out a style guide, you can't just end it there. You can't just be like, here's a PDF that you've got to read and check out. There also needs to be templates that artists can work from, which represent the values and the tones that you want to have, maybe even the sort of style of brushes you want to use. So if it's a serious sort of concept art, you're making characters in concept art, and you want the character artist to have very strict look. You want to keep a very strict look for the game. You want to make sure they have a template which has everything in that. Like if it's the body types, body shapes, the exact palettes that the character should follow, the sort of values that you should stick within as well, so it doesn't look too contrasty or too pastely. And I think once the style guide's written, you then also spin off and then create extra documents, which are more like, I did this for Legends as well. You've got like a nice big template for just characters or for just environments, and within that you've got all the information dotted around the edges that represent everything the artist needs to know to create the style, which is written down in the style guide.
Mhm.
So I think that's important. It's not just a case of, because style guides, they get to a point where they get kind of retired because everyone knows the kind of art style and the way you're looking. But it is always good to jump back in, look at it again, midway through a product, and then just do a sort of side by side of where you're at and where the style guide's at, and sort of do a comparison. But as I said, I really think that once you've got the style guide done, it's really important to have a very clear templatized documents that cover each of the aspects of the art that's going to happen in the game as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And in this case, is the solo art director responsible to making sure that the document is being created, getting updated, as providing the right information? Or is it more like a team collaboration, of course, supported by the AD? But do you, for example, get the help of people from your team who are collaborating on the document? Of course, their material might be there, but basically, can they also come in and put their information in there? How does it work?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Kind of torn between two answers here.
Hmm.
I think you do need to. No, you don't. I don't think you do need to work with the team to get everyone on board, everyone's sold on the vision. But also, it can't be too much of a democracy either, because you need someone with a clear vision of how it should look and how it should feel, how it should play. So, I mean, you need art directors, you need product leads, you need designers. Everyone has to have a very strict, not very strict, but very clear vision of what they're after. And I think if you open the floor too much, it can become a bit woolly. You've got too many different opinions, too many different, that sounds cool, I might try that, or that sounds cool, I might try that. And then you kind of get a product which is a bit spotty, right? It's just bits of everything. So I think that's the same for art. You want to make sure that at the beginning you brainstorm everything, or even as you progress through and you start creating new features, you brainstorm that with the team, you get all the input, but then you as an art director, it's your duty to sort of take all those ideas, that big juicy amount of ideas, and then turn them into something which is more cohesive for the look of the product and the game.
Mm.
I think if you just throw it to the floor and let the floor decide, it's not going to work. You do need to be very clear of what you're after, and also once you have the leads and seniors that work on your team and they understand exactly what you're after, once they're all bought in on it and they like it and they know that it's there, they've had their opinions into it too, and they can see their stuff in there as well. Everyone's bought into it. They want to get it. They want to make it. They want to get this thing done. And that's when you get your best artwork, is when you've got a team that's excited to work on a product and they see that you've done the work to get it where it is. So I think it's very important that you work with the team to get the ideas. Then the art director filters the ideas down and then gets them down into the style guide. And if there's no reason why another artist can't update it if something better happens, but I think the first pass, it needs to be the art director that sort of just gets everything down, looks at it, reads through it, makes sure that it's it makes sense for the vision of what the game lead is after. And then then afterwards you can then start adding the little bits of extra from the other team members or whatnot. But from the start, you want to make sure that it's your vision that's in there.
Which is why I kind of like this whole process and having this kind of document, because you may have a certain vision and maybe you have been very expressive about it. You talk about your vision in the team meetings, you tell to the artist about what you're looking for. But this document, I think, serves as a clear notice board. I mean, I don't want to use the word notice board because it kind of like sounds strict. But basically, it's a platform which you can use in order to completely tell to the team and be very transparent about the vision that you are trying to go to, or you're wanting to make the team go towards it. And I think this is where it opens up a lot of dialogue as well as like opinions from people about whether they're aligned to this direction or not, if they have some doubts about it. And this is the moment where you can talk about it. So apart from this document just serving as a reference point to how to just go and work, I think this document really helps into aligning people, especially aligning the entire art team with their director on a single vision.
Yeah. Because I mean, you also need, it's the the vision is also based on what the lead wants as well, right? So it needs to be based strongly around what they're after. So they're the ones that input the first direction of what they want, and then from that, you kind of it's kind of like a backward step, right? You speak to the lead. The lead tells you what you want, or you know the game you're working on, you know the game type it is, so you know there's certain rules already of how the game should kind of feel and look, right? Obviously, yeah, it's good to break the rules, but usually you want to stick within the rules of what the game designer, game lead is after. And then, from there, you even have, something already in your head of what you're going to need to do. And I think, when art teams come together as well, they normally understand what the game is and the genre, or the IP or whatever you're working on. And usually they already have a kind of, they're kind of clued into what they're coming in towards to do. So, yeah, the vision, as you said, right, that vision guide is really important to have as a kind of, yeah, I know what you mean. Notice board sounds a little bit strange, but yeah, something to look at and be like, okay, we're aiming towards that. And yeah, it's good to have that. It's good to have that. Really good to have that.
One of the things which makes me like always wonder on what's the processes of other art directors is in order to put up this kind of document, because I have my personal favorite about what I like in style guides. Like apart from the best benchmark examples and stuff like this, the thing that interests me the most is, and I think this is where it helps you to understand the vision and the style that you're looking for, are the do's and don'ts examples. Now, do's are very easy to do because I think you have the right examples on what you want to do. How do you basically do the don'ts part? Like, is that something that you deliberately get created from your team just for the purpose of the document? How do you actually make sure that those assets are created? Or are those actual practical assets?
We're talking about like North Star assets, like the stuff that the really, the ones that are going to be, this is the style.
Yeah. And then including the stuff like, for example, the character should not look like this, or for example, the color should not be like this, or for example, the level of detail should not be like this. So those kind of like comparisons on what's the right style and what's the not right style. The not examples are borrowed from the internet, or are they created from like just because, for example, if I'm probably putting like a chest from the game, and this is how we are supposed to do the chest, would I probably make an alternate version of the chest with making some mistakes on it with regards to the off style in order to just communicate my point, or like how else? Yeah.
So it's just like at the beginning where you guys are sort of deciding how a chest should look or how a character should look. Is this right at the beginning we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it should basically be a reference, a visual reference for people to completely understand your vision that, okay, I should never put so thin object on the design. Like this is a complete loan. Or basically, for example, I should not put a texture on my my work because this is not part of the style.
I see.
So how are those examples generally done? Because maybe you are working in a tight deadline and you have a lot of stuff to do towards the game. How are those examples created by the art team?
I mean, I've seen teams work in different styles at the beginning to find a sort of a style that's going to work. And from those initial sketches, you've got some which are kind of photorealistic, some which are, really proportionalized in the wrong way. And they've used those as this is a no and this is a yes. And that's useful if you actually have assets that the team's made already that are based around. So say you've got a character and you've got 8 different artists draw that same character. And then you get the 8 different variations of it. Someone's doing photorealistic, someone's doing really stylized, someone's doing sort of abstract. That's really good to then have a kind of sort of a litmus test of how it's going to look, because you've got all these different variables, and you could be like, well, that's quite nice. I like this. We can bring that over to here, but this one here, this number 5, this is feeling like it's the right one. So it's kind of like it's. I know you've done this before, so I know you've got like just a page, and you've got like left and you've got right, and then on the left you've got like casual, and then on the right you've got photorealistic, and then you're like, we want to be right here in the center. I mean, that's the simplest way of doing this stuff is, you know, using stuff. Okay, maybe it's not the simplest, but it's definitely the most consistent way of getting a visual target of how a character should look. If we're using characters as an example, is by having the artist draw the characters in different ways and then looking at them and working out which ones are going to work for the product and which ones aren't. But if you did want to go down the photo reference route, which is like you're putting together, this would be like vision guide, you know, right at the sort of beginning, even before Style Guide, right at the beginning, you would find something of, you know, if we're still using characters as an example, you'd find 3 different variations of a character, you know, maybe using a Disney style character. And you know, there's those different styles people have drawn of Disney characters. And then you could then use that as a very simple way of like, this one is, you know, too abstract. This one in the center is perfect. You know, the height is right, the head height is right, the legs are just right. This one on the end, yeah, this is too tall. You know, it's not right. The texture isn't right. So that's the simplest way of doing it. Right at the beginning, the vision guide, just, you know, using stuff that exists already. But if you jump into a product later, which normally happens to me, I usually jump into a product once it's already in production or, you know, past concept phase, and it's like we've got to change all this stuff. It's usually easy because there's stuff from the beginning that was made that I can look back on and use that as a reference for, okay, well, we can see why we're not doing that direction now. We're going to avoid that one. We're going to push it more in this way. And then it's just a case of, you know, using your art skills to do a paint over and sort of tweak it in the way that you want it to look. And then using, you know, obviously, we're good artists, right? But we're not the principal artists when it comes to, if you want to get a good 3D character made, you go to a really good 3D artist. Yeah, if you want to get like a really good, yeah, hard surface model made, you go to a really good artist that does that stuff. And that's where, you know, you've done the paint over, you've done something which pretty much matches what you're after. You then take that to the principal and then they do the actual work for you. You're like, this is it. You work with them to get the actual look that you're after, like down to the texture, down to the brush strokes, down to everything, even the finest detail, that 95%, you want to get into that BT, or North Star as I'm calling them now. And then when your North Star is complete, which is like your character, is then that's what you show to the team. You're like, this is it, guys. This is what we're aiming for, you know?
Yeah.
Then you can break down the process of how you got to there, you know, going from, you know, the original sketches to, you know, your paint over to then, you know, this version, and include the work that, you know, you and the principal artist, or not principal, but anyone that you're working with that's working with you to get that character done. This is how you got to this step. You know, you can show, you know, how you made mistakes along the way, you know, what you did to improve it. And that's usually the methodology that I sort of go down. That's the route I take.
Yeah, completely agree. Which is why I really like to preserve all the process done with the team, especially in the beginning days where maybe even you were not completely sure of stuff, as well as like the style was still getting polished. So all of those records of stuff that the team made, they basically like are the great composition tool for finally putting together that, this is the end result that we want to reach to. Do you, and I'm slightly taking a bit off from the style guide, but I'm talking more about the feedback. When you work as an art director and we are passing on a feedback to the art team, how, let me put it this way. What's the style of your feedback given to the team? Is it like style guide worthy material that basically like whatever JPEG that you're sending to them as feedback note can directly go into style guide as also like for future reference? Or is it very loose, just the interaction between you and the artist, only that person can understand, and it's only for the purpose of getting the work done? Like, what's your systematic approach of putting together all your thoughts? Like, do you very beautify and put together all the notes in a very crystal clear, understandable kind of like comment?
I mean, I guess there is some consistency in my notes. If we're using characters as an example, you know, paint over with, I usually use 3 colors, right? I use red, yellow, and then green. Green is obviously like, this is good, this is great stuff, love this. Right? And then yellow is the cautionary stuff. It's like, maybe we could, you know, tweak this bit here, you know, tune this bit here. And red is obviously like, no, we don't want that, that's wrong. Get rid of this, crop that. and usually it's a mixture of handwritten notes with, it depends, right? I would say there's three different types I use. One is if it's in a really good way, but it's more like just those final tweaks to get it right. Usually it's notes with crosses, arrows, and ticks, and just some tweaks of how it should be, just written down of what we're aiming for. If it's more of it's kind of quite off the kind of the style guide, then you would probably paint over it yourself, and then drop in an image which is from the style guide explaining the kind of look we're aiming for, and then send that back to the artist. And I think then the final one is probably just doing it myself and then sending it back and be like, that's more like working with like a junior or like a new team member or something. Just it's sometimes faster just to grab something from ZBrush and work on it and then send it back. Just be like, this is kind of what we're aiming for. It sounds a bit micromanagery, but sometimes I guess it's I kind of like to work on lots of things and quite fast, and that works better for me. That's usually last resort. I'm much more of a notes with paint over kind of person, really. And then the notes I feel like are more beneficial because you're giving the artist the ability to work back into that and get that right, rather than you're doing it for them. It's only like the only time I really work into a mesh is really when it's like last resort. It's like we're not getting it. We just can't get there. So it's really a case of you're having to do it yourself and then send it back to get it prepared properly.
Exactly. And I think it also serves as a great tool for art directors to have in their portfolio, because this is something which I believe many of the art directors actually struggle with. And I get reached out by certain people that they say that, hey, I've been working in the industry for all these years as an art director. The games that I worked on, those assets were not done by me. How do I even put together my portfolio in order to show to next prospective employers? And they generally sometimes just settle on the final mock-ups which were created by the team. But I think the most important thing, especially from studio leads or whoever are trying to hire an art director, they're interested to see the differences that you made, like the contributions that you did, the kind of notes and feedback that you gave. So if you're able to keep the records of those things with you and you are able to showcase that as your portfolio, I think that's something that is convincing enough people to understand that, this person.
Yeah, I would agree with you. That it's tricky, isn't it? Because art directors, they sort of get to a point where I guess they can be kind of hands off in a way, right? They're just sort of directing the look of the game. So the assets they're touching is really, it's just through feedback and not so much actually handling the work itself. That's why I kind of think I like touching the work. It's because I kind of, as much as I love, just writing notes and telling people to change this, make this like that, or making style guides, I do still like actually, doing 3D work as well. And 2D work. Because I mean, as you know, right, working through all the companies I've worked at in the last 10 years, I've worked on every genre, I feel like now. Match 3, RPGs, endless races, everything. So I mean, it's good to. It feels nice to actually also, as an art director yourself, you must know this, to actually do some work that's going into the game as well. I really enjoy that when I get the chance to do that, because the style guide. It's something that it does have a sell by date, right? It's kind of done by when you enter production. There's tweaks here and there, and maybe there's adjustments because tech art come up with a better solution, or developers think of something to do with procedural, so you can kind of get rid of some things. But after that, really, it comes down to managing the project and the people on the project. So I think personally for me, it's like beginning of a game, vision guide. Just something which is the vision. The story of why, the emotional part of why the game's going to look the way it's going to look. And then once you enter, I guess pre-production, that is then when you start getting the North Stars made, and then the style guides written based around the work that's made from those.
Mm. What about some certain cases where the project is constantly evolving and maybe the style continues to change, even some aspects of gameplay, and there are lots of decisions on design which are constantly evolving. Let's say you're getting a bit more serious now, and even for example, stylistically, we are trying to cater to a different audience.
Yeah.
How should the style guide continue to like be on the train, continue
It's,
to
yeah, that
or you
sounds like
just
a
give up?
pivot.
So
No,
yeah.
that sounds like a pivot, right? Like, I've had projects that have gone, this might sound minor, but it's not. They've gone from like portrait to landscape, and that changes all the UI, all the wireframes, like the UX wireframes. And that does change the heart of the style guide at the same time, especially when the game genre is changing too. So yeah, the maybe the first few pages of the style guide still make sense, which is telling you the emotional story of the art that you're going to create. But then everything that comes after that, which is why we have buttons in a certain way, or why we have characters lit in a certain from a different direction, as an example, all that stuff can change, and it does change because it's not a simple case of just the style guide is done when it's written for a very specific type of a product. If that product changes quite dramatically, everything in the style guide probably changes as well in many ways. So that's where you then have to sort of rework the style guide. Essentially, there's good. Usually, the thing is though, if you're moving from something, as example, portrait to landscape, you can still keep quite a lot of the original assets. It's more a case of now you're just sort of refactoring them to be in a different orientation. But when that happens as well, it's usually into a project. Maybe it could be into a project a little bit later than maybe a year or 2 years into it. By then as well, new games have come out. Things are looking better. There's new ideas. That's also a time when you can refresh as well, right? So I mean, I think that's a good case well for refreshing the style guide as times change and products change and audiences flavors change. You can also then you should adapt as well.
Mm.
I think obviously there's some products that don't do that because they don't need to. Like for example, some games just have a certain look, and that look exists in all of that sort of company's product. But I think if you have the chance to tweak it because you think you can improve it in a better way, and the team's on board with that, like as in like the leadership, then you should do that. Which does mean new North Stars and some new style guides. But that's always fun. That's always fun as well. It can be a little bit demoralizing, but you can always. There's good things that come out of that. There's good things that come out, like the game's going to get refreshed. You're getting all the support of the leadership team. Everyone's really excited that you're doing this. And it can work out for the better for sure. Yes, even though a style guide may be set in stone, if a game pivots or something changes, like leadership or genre, or even just the general core, then you should be ready to adapt and also think about changing the whole of the sort of work you did originally to match the new genre, the new sort of leadership direction. So you might have to. There's sometimes a case of refreshing a product completely.
Yeah. And I think this is also a very important thing for the art directors to have like a growth mindset, because maybe even if stuff is not changing, but I think there are moments where they should kind of like doubt their own decisions as well. Stuff that they maybe wrote down like a year ago, but they should not just religiously follow it because they wrote it down or they believed in it and they also evolved with stuff and continue to progress. And now, okay, I'm thinking that we need to further simplify the designs. Whatever we discussed and agreed on in the past is not making sense for me now, and I think we should go and adjust this.
Yeah.
Mm.
Especially if times change and perhaps schedules get shorter, for example, then you should think about maybe the style guide that you wrote originally was the way that characters have been made was too complex. You might need to reduce the scope of those quite a bit. And that definitely means you need to then restart reworking stuff from the visual target. So I would never say, I would say, as I said earlier, visual target kind of goes into sort of retirement at production. It kind of just gets minor sort of, updates. But it's usually during, concept phase and pre-production. That's where those two guides, like the vision guide and the style guide, they're in their most element then. That's when the most of the work's getting done on those.
Mm. But like we just mentioned, and we've been seeing this a lot, like style guides cannot answer everything for you.
Yeah.
What are the cases, or are there any cases where, for example, someone in your team is referring to your own style guide, and they created something, but then it's not there, and they come and say that, hey, I followed the style guide. Like, what's the kind of like the balance that you can have with your artist and the understanding between them, where they use some of their own creative freedom versus entirely adhering to, because sometimes adhering just to instructions is probably going to fail, and there is a balance of what's needed from creative freedom, which is not covered in the style guide, and you cannot just blindly restrict yourself to it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can cover everything in the style guide. Otherwise, it becomes like a manifesto, right? That's not what you want. It has to. You cover the biggest bits, the best way to explain this. I mean, if we're using characters, for example, things in the style guide that would exist would be body types, like a big body type, like a muscly body type, or aesthetic body type. And that exists probably for a technical reason as well, which is the character rig. They're built for a certain way to be made. So, you can't go crazy with the body shape. You can't make it all like a sort of Hulk, sort of body type. You have to stick within those limitations. But the actual coating of the character itself, that can be whatever you want, right? If there's a description, like how it worked normally on Legends, for example, was we had a body type which was like I think it was like small, muscly, and we used red, and obviously we know Red's personality, and from design we knew what weapons he was going to have. So from that it was like, wait, it's a weapon, this body type, these are his colors. Go ahead, just work to what you want to that character, and that's the fun bit, because you're giving the artist the creativity from they've got a small descriptive text of what the character is, they've got a summary of what that character can do, they've got the color palette they should use, they've got the body type. Now it's a case of just go to town on that, make it work, make something really fancy. So you want to balance creativity with the style guide's rule book. But as you mentioned, right, if you stifle creativity, artists kind of get really bored of that. They just that's not what they want to do. They don't want to follow just instructions constantly. They're not a factory. They're inventors. So I think it's really important that you keep in a style guide the most essential information in there, but you then let the team who's going to work on that go to town on what they can do using their creativity to make it work.
True. And if you do not do that, I think the whole project will not evolve. The style will not evolve, because you're just not allowing the creative freedom to test out some stuff. And naturally, when people are working and they continue to work, the stuff that they're making for the game is going to improve. Maybe when you wrote down the style guide and you created the North Star, it felt like North Star back then, because that was like, oh yeah, we have now the results. This is looking amazing. But in coming months, overall, it's probably gonna not work as best as a reference, and this is where you need to replace it. Yeah. Does a style guide help in any way, for example, for resolving any creative dispute between the team or between the cross functions?
It helps with maybe leadership in a way, because if you've got those North Star visuals which cover like the UI, the main aspects of the game, which could be characters and backgrounds or whatever's inside the product, you've got those to say this is what we're making, guys. This is it. This is what it's going to look like. And then if like later on down the line and the game looks like that, and there's issues with, oh well, we're not sure about this. It's like, well, this is what we promised. We haven't changed the promise. This is what you got. So it's very good for referencing back on that, and also being able to time box probably how long something would take to make. So again, because the style guide is also a place where you have these North Star images / visual targets in them. You make using characters as a reference, you make the characters to the exact specification of the game asset. That gives you time also then to work with production to work out how long it's going to take to time box a character. So if it's going to take like 2 days to concept, 5 days to model, 3 days to take from high poly to low poly, that gives you that to work with. So there's lots of stuff that comes out of Style Guide, which is really, really, really useful. Really useful. Stuff that you can take to, outsources, for example, right? That's where Style Guide is very important. Much more important than actually in-house. If you're working with a company that's going to create your characters and they're going to create 100 characters, they need to understand everything about proportion, color palettes, the range of emotion these characters carry, a brief description of the game, some environment images as well to kind of really get a feel for where it's all taking place. And I think that's probably mostly for me, I would say, it's onboarding new team members, keeping the leadership team up to date with how the product's going to look, and also for outsourcing. That's the most important reason for a style guide to exist for me. Is
great that you touched upon outsourcing, because I think this is one of the most crucial phase where basically you have to have the need of having a well documented content. And I've been on both sides, and I remember when I was on the vendor side providing solutions and services to whoever was sending work to us, those documents were absolutely needed. And if in the absence of those, whatever amount of benchmark assets the teams can provide, or the projects and the clients can provide, they were not enough until there was like a process document about talking in the details about the way how these things have to be done. What about I personally want to know, how has your journey as an art director been with respect to style guide in your role and work? Like, for example, did you do that from the beginning? Like, you always knew about it, you did these, or you over the period of time, as well as on your projects? Like, honestly, how many of style guides have you done when you are working on every project? Or there have been some cases where you may not have done style guide, and still the project went through, the game went through, the content went through.
I would say style guides came around to me probably about 2013. That's when I first started using them. Beforehand, it would have been like I mentioned, it was being more like big piece of concept art with no really guide of how you get to that. It's more like this is just how it looks. But previously, beforehand, it was only between 2009 and 2013 that I was working with a company where I was more than just an artist like producing artwork. I was more like leading the sort of art team in some ways. And so when you're working with somebody like a big studio, which was from 2006 to 2009, I was working with big studios in the UK. You were a very small cog in that team. And even it's quite funny, even those guys didn't actually have style guides, which is crazy, right? They didn't have anything like that. So it was alien to me. I didn't even know anything about that. It was only working with an independent company that, like an indie, that I thought, wow, we need to have some artwork to kind of reference what we're gonna make, because we're working for we were contracting for a TV company in the UK, and we wanted to show them, what we envisioned the game would look like. So we did some sort of visual targets to share with them, to show them what we're aiming for. And it really helped us to understand, the kind of puzzles, the kind of atmosphere that the game would have as well, which is really good. But it was never ever turned into any kind of guide. Never. No, it really wasn't until like 2013 that I started working in Germany that I started thinking and seeing more guides, because I was obviously working with, proper art directors, right? That's where you start working with actual really talented people, and then you learn from those guys. And it was from there that a style guide became like second nature for any kind of big product in a big team. So I mean, how many style guides have I done? Probably about five style guides.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, about 5
Mm-hmm.
style guides. They are really important. They're really important. They are.
Mm-hmm.
They're
But
really really useful, because honestly, I think just want to stress this. I think the biggest impact is actually for leadership. When they see a style guide, they're confident in what you're doing. It gives them confidence. If they don't see anything like that, it's just like, oh yeah, we're working on something. It's coming. It'll be in the build in a few weeks' time. Yeah,
mm,
it's coming. But if they see there's a direction, and that there's going to be a cadence based on the sort of estimates that you've created through the style guide, that makes them happy. So I think it's really important to have a style guide, for getting leadership on board, for definitely for outsourcers, so they're able to produce the work that you need, and obviously for onboarding. But onboarding, I think, is a lot simpler because you're working with people in house, and you can go through with them personally stuff, and they're working with the artists and they can see what's happening. But top two is leadership and outsourcers for me.
mm. But can there be cases where a project can still be successful, the team can still be successful in an entire absence of a style guide? Like, for example, I'm going to give some scenarios where maybe this is possible. Like, let's say all the people in the team, they all work together for so many years. They have a similar style, for example, or the game they're making is basically a clear clone of something that exists. So they have a very direct reference from one of the products in the market. So they don't really need to discover and invent something and put together their thoughts. Or if they're very systematic and organized anyways with their work which have been done, so there's always like a good Google Drive folder from the benchmark assets, which is enough for them,
Yeah,
and they have a great bonding and understanding between them, so they don't never necessarily need a document or something like this.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think, I mean, as I said, like I worked in the indie company where we didn't have any style guides, but we made a product that was consistent. I just I think you if you do have a style guide, you'd be more successful probably.
Mm.
Like with building out a game world, I think a style guide is useful for that. It could also come down to the sort of I think comes down to type of game / product you're making as well. Yeah, how dependent you will be on a style guide. But I think that, I mean, I think you can be successful. I just think now, in where I'm at and where working with companies now, I think that style guides very important for what we do, because it's not just useful for. I mean, I'm throwing even more names in now, but like when I work with marketing, I can show them the style guide and they get a feeling for what the game's about from just that, right? So that's another plus. I mean, you could just show them a build of the game if you're just game builders and you haven't got a style guide, and just let them play through it, and that works too. But I think it seems like it's a very good thing to have for multiple reasons. I can't see a reason why you wouldn't want one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally. But in the case of, and this is more like a wrap up question, but let's say there is a team who have completely, like, they don't have any experience of preparing style guide before, they're not able to find time for it or whatever. Is there any kind of piece of advice that you can give to people? Because, for example, sometimes when you're drafting this document, you have so much of your own pressure about it that, hey, I'm putting together something which is not going to serve as guidelines, and yeah, I don't want to uh, make some mistakes or whatever. So how should people approach this when they're struggling to create this kind of document? How should they take it easy and make this?
So, I mean, I kind of see a style guide as, if you're a writer and you're going to write a story or you're going to write a TV show, you need to kind of know who your characters are, and you need to write them down before. I imagine you want to write them down beforehand of who your characters are. You're not going to be just writing the story and just making it up as you go. I mean, you could, but I feel like that would become confusing. So I feel like that, as an artist, you want to know who your characters are going to be before you start making the actual game. And characters, I'm using as a sort of just a generic term. I mean, for anything inside any kind of asset, I think it would be good to have an understanding of what those assets are going to be and how they're going to look beforehand. I think it would just give you a lot more peace of mind when you're in the midst of production or even concepting, and you've got at least a little bit of something to look back on and be like, oh yeah, we did think about that. That's cool. We should focus more on this. And also, if you're working on anything, if you start making artwork, like sketches and doodles beforehand, you'll be able to see if there's any sort of consistency between them, and you'll be able to pick up on those and get those. So there is a consistency between your characters and your environments. If that's something you would want in your game, which I think is quite important for like mass produced products, is to have a consistency. So yeah, I think if you could spend like a few hours, just making something basic, just a sort of a basic sort of recipe to hold the ingredients in, I think that will help you out tons. Yeah.
True. And I think it just simply mostly requires like a very organized mindset. In most cases, it might just look like, hey, this is a very obvious thing. Everything that you are encountering every day or every week or every month sometimes may just look so obvious that you are thinking that it is it doesn't have any significance or importance, but it is important. And if you're actually capturing it and just having a very good organized mindset or putting these things together, like I said, finding some time here and there in order to update the document, add more content, and just organize and group it according to the sections and stuff. I think it doesn't really needs a very focus that I'm going to sit for 1 month and make style guide. It can't be done this way, I think.
Yeah. It's an ongoing process. And you only need it for when you're developing a certain part of the game as well, or the visuals of a game. You don't need to be working on it constantly.
Yeah. Great. This was really insightful, and I really appreciate your time and your thoughts. I think we learned a lot today about not just the what a style guide contains, but the practicality of how much we can really do this, and a lot of things that we understood about the utility and team size. So a lot of stuff that we learn. There is also some amount of style guides which are available around the internet. I made a list of it, so I'm gonna tag it in the description so people can actually refer to some of the games, style guides which are out in the market. By the way, I also created a small template for style guide long ago. Like this is like 10-15 years ago. If you go and look for style guide in games, probably there will be a SlideShare link that will open for the template that I created. There are lots of people who still reach out to me to ask for the template, and I believe they use it, and it's very helpful in order to just structure your stuff for your game. And Jack, thank you so much. And I'm going to put the description to how to connect with Jack. So if anyone wants to reach out to him, the link and all the LinkedIn and stuff like that might be there in the description. But yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for this.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much.
All right. And this was the first episode on our podcast. So I really look forward for the feedback from people. If you could subscribe or comment, that will really help us to understand what kind of stuff that you're looking for. Even if you want to have any specific topic that we will need to discuss in the next ones, that can be great. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.